Welcome to Bible Ahas. I'm your host, Jennifer Cunningham. An aha moment is when you have a sudden insight or discovery, and I hope we have some today. Let's get started. Hey, y'all. Just a quick note before we start today. If you've been enjoying the episodes, make sure to follow, share with anyone you think this might be a blessing to, and if you could give some stars, that would be great because it helps reach more people that way. So today we're going to start with Matthew chapter 8, and we're going to be talking about just some more of the things that Jesus did in Matthew. So he's just finished his Sermon on the Mount. One of the books that I've been reading in theology class about the different books of the Bible, it was talking about how Matthew actually took several of Jesus' sermons and put them together in what we know as the Sermon on the Mount. So the last few chapters we've been going over, they probably weren't like all in one setting. They were probably several sermons that he put together. So starting in Matthew chapter 8, it says, when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. So this would be like right after one of those sermons. We don't know what part of it, but after he's given his sermon, he's coming down from the mountain and the people are following him. They're still hungry for more. They want more. Even though he's finished his sermon for the day, they're still following him. And I think that's kind of amazing because how many times have we gone and we listened to a sermon and what are we hungry for at the end? We're hungry for lunch. We're like, let's be done. It's time for lunch. No, they were hungry for more of his word. And of course, it was Jesus giving the sermon. So it was a very special sermon. But they were hungry for more of his words and more of his wisdom, not just thinking about lunch like we sometimes do. And then it says, a leper came up to him and bowed down before him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you are able to make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one about this, but go show yourself to the priest for inspection and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony, evidence to them of your healing. This is a reference to Leviticus 14:2. So back in that day, leprosy wasn't just considered a disease. In that culture, in the Jewish culture, with the law, they didn't just look on it as a disease. It was considered uncleanliness. This meant that you couldn't go and, be with your family for Shabbat and participate in these things. You were deemed unclean, which was a very big deal because uncleanliness was like being separated from God. So leprosy wasn't just looked on as a disease, but it was also looked on as God's displeasure on you, that you were leprous. And people did not touch people with leprosy, not just because of the disease itself, which was you did not want to catch, but also because you would be deemed unclean. They're deemed unclean. You don't want to be unclean. Under the law, the priest would deem a person clean or unclean after examining their sores. So we have reference to this in Leviticus 13 and 14. Very specific, if the scab looks this way, if it looks that way, how to examine it. God gave them very specific rules on how to judge if someone was leprous or not. I once heard a guy one time teaching that he would have been deemed unclean because he had such bad acne. And I was like, not really. If you read Leviticus, you'll see they had very specific things to look for. You wouldn't have been deemed unclean because of your acne. They knew the difference between acne and leprosy. I can guarantee you that. Okay, but you were deemed unclean. You would be sent away from your family, from everybody around you because you are unclean. You have to be away. We can't touch you. We can't be near you because we don't want to catch it. We don't want to be unclean. Jesus, on the other hand, touches the leper. And so the law, it could deem you clean or unclean. The law can tell you this person's unclean, but the law could not cleanse a leper. So for Jesus to come and touch the leper, which is something you did not do back then, speak the words of healing, and that leper be healed. He was doing what the law could not do. which is something that only the Messiah could do. He was touching the unclean and making it clean. If we look at that in context of now, we all start unclean on the inside. We have sin. Sin is the leprosy of the soul, basically. And there's only one who can reach in and touch where nobody else can and cleanse it. The law can tell us that we're sinners. The law can show us that we need a savior. But only he can reach in and cleanse what is unclean. Jesus was able to touch the untouchable because he's not going to be corrupted by touching the unclean, because he is the cure for the unclean. He is the cure. The law can show us that we need a savior, but only he can cleanse us. Now, something else to notice in this is the leper didn't come before Jesus demanding to be healed. He didn't walk up to him and say, "I will be healed in Jesus' name," and just proclaim it. He came before Jesus humbly and asked. He said, "Lord, if you are willing, you are able to make me clean." So in this, he's showing that he knows that Jesus can heal him. He has faith that Jesus can heal him, but he's also asking for God's will to be done. Remember when we talked about the format for prayer and the Lord's Prayer? We ask, we believe, we have faith, but we also ask for God's will to be done. And the great thing about this is the next thing Jesus said is, "I am willing." He speaks these words. His words have power. When you read through Matthew and you read through the stories of these healings, just his words have the power to heal. Just his touch has the power to heal. Now, in this one, he does both. He touches and he speaks. But there are some cases where he just speaks, some where he just touches the person or the person touches him. There is power in just his words, in just his touch. And it says immediately he was healed. When we come before God and we admit that we're inwardly leprous, that we're sinful, and we ask him to cleanse us, he won't hesitate. He will make us whole immediately. Also, healing the leper shows that Jesus was the Messiah. So in Matthew 11, 5-6, the Amplified Version, this is the story of when John, he's in prison, he's getting discouraged. He knew Jesus was the Messiah, but he's getting discouraged. And so he sends these guys to go ask Jesus, "Who are you? Are you the one we've been waiting for, or do we need to look for somebody else," basically? And Jesus replies to tell John, "The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed by healing, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the gospel preached to them." Now, this is in reference to Isaiah, the prophecy of Isaiah. And Isaiah 35, 5-6 says, "Then the lame will leap like deer, and the tongue of the mute will shout for joy. For waters will break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. Then the eyes of the blind will be open, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped." So just more references. It's just, I love the way Matthew shows over and over again, more references to prophecy of this is him. He's the one. Just over and over again. So after he cleanses the leper, then it says, as Jesus went to Capernaum, a centurion came to him, begging him for help and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed with intense and terrible tormenting pain." Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied to him, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man subject to authority, of higher rank, with soldiers subject to me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed, and he said to those who were following him, "I tell you truthfully, I have not found such great faith as this with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many Gentiles will come from the east and the west and will sit down to feast at the table and enjoy God's promises with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, because they accepted me as Savior. While the sons and heirs of the kingdom, the descendants of Abraham, who will not recognize me as the Messiah, will be thrown out into utter darkness in a place which is farthest removed from the kingdom. There will be weeping and sorrow and pain and grinding of teeth in distress and anger. Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, it will be done for you, as you have believed." And the servant was restored to his health that very hour. So something that was kind of funny to me, and it's not actually, I don't know how relevant it is, but when I was looking at centurion, I checked to see exactly what the name meant. I knew it was a Roman soldier, but of course, it's a Roman soldier that he's in charge over 100 men. Thus the name centurion. I don't know why I never thought about that before. It's like, well, yes, like centurion, it's a number of 100. I don't think I ever thought about that before. So that's just like a little bonus aha moment for me, even though it wasn't like anything major. It was just one of those moments where you read something and you realize something and you're like, why did I never think about that before? Again, though, you read, he came humbly before Jesus. He didn't come acting like Jesus owed him because of his military title. He didn't say, "You must heal my servant." He came humbly and asked. And then you notice Jesus offered to come heal his servant. This was at a time when most Jews would not go into the home of a Gentile. You didn't do that. But Jesus, he didn't care that he was a Gentile. He was looking at his heart, not his heritage. He offered to go with him, but the officer had so much faith. For one thing, he didn't feel like he was worthy for Jesus to come to his house. But again, he had so much faith that he believed that even if there was this huge distance, that all Jesus had to do was speak a word and his servant would be healed. And he was right. Jesus just spoke the word and his servant was healed. Jesus was amazed by his faith and begins telling those around him that it's faith in him and not their heritage that will save them. In this time, there were a lot of Jews that believed that any descendant of Abraham would be saved just because they were a descendant of Abraham. And Jesus is letting them know that it's not because you're a descendant of Abraham. It's because you believe in him, the Messiah. So after he heals the centurion's servant, then we read about Peter's mother-in-law. When Jesus went into Peter's house in Capernaum, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. He touched her, and her fever left her, and she got up and served him. The very first thing I noticed about this is the very first thing she does after she's healed is she gets up and she serves. So how often when we ask God for things, we ask for healing, we ask that we'll feel better from, maybe we're just, like we have a cold or something. We have something we want to go do. And we ask God, please heal me. Don't let me be sick so I can go do this thing. How often are we asking because we want to go serve him? More often than not, it's because we want to go do what we want to go do. When he healed her, the very first thing she does is get up and serve him. She doesn't go, oh, I need to go do this. I need to go do that. I got to go, I want to do all these things. No, her very first thing on her list to do is to serve Jesus. And that should be our heart also when we're asking for things, is that it's not always about us. That it's not always, I want to feel better so I can, go play a baseball game or something. I mean, it's okay to ask. It's totally okay to ask. But we should have more of the heart and the mindset of, I want to feel better so I can go and do what God wants me to do, whether that be play a baseball game or go serve somebody and help somebody. And then also this mention of her getting up and serving immediately. shows the miraculous nature of the healing. Most people, when they get up out of a fever, when their fever goes away, they still feel kind of weak. They still, they're feeling better, but they're still not feeling super great. Like they'll be tired, maybe lightheaded. Um, they don't usually just get immediately up and start serving people. This shows that when he touched her, it was complete, full healing. Like it wasn't just her fever broke at that moment and she felt better and we attribute that to Jesus. It was that, boom, she's completely healed. Like she's perfectly fine now. We don't see a mention on here of him speaking over her. With this one, it's just touch. Again, showing that just his touch is so powerful. His words are powerful and his touch are powerful. So the next section, it says, when evening came, they brought to him many who were under the power of demons, and he cast out evil spirits with a word, again, with a word, and restored to health all who were sick, exhibiting his authority as the Messiah. So he fulfilled what was spoken of the prophet Isaiah. He himself took our infirmities upon himself and carried away our diseases. So again, just talking about just a word, his voice and his level of authority. It's kind of amazing. Then also the reference to Isaiah 53, 4-5. And I'm going to read the whole passage from there. But in fact, he has borne our griefs. He has carried our sorrows and pains. Yet we ignorantly assumed that he was stricken, struck down by God, and degraded and humiliated by him. But he was wounded for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our wickedness. Our sin, our injustice, our wrongdoing. The punishment required for our well-being fell on him, and by his stripes, wounds, we are healed. The other part of this, with it talking about him casting out demons, it also just showed the level of authority he had, that he has power over Satan, that he has the authority to say, come out, and they have to. Now, the next portion, it says, now when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cast off for the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Then on his way to board the boat, a scribe, who was a respected and authoritative interpreter of the law, came and said to him, Master, I will accompany you as your student wherever you go. And Jesus replied to him, foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father, collect my inheritance. But Jesus said to him, follow me, believing in me as master and teacher, and allow the spiritually dead to bury their own dead. Now, the scribe was hasty in his declaration of I will follow you. He did not stop and count the cost. Very likely, he saw the miracles. He saw all these miracles going on, and he may have thought that, this man that can do all of these things, there's going to be some glory in following him and going where he goes. Jesus knows the heart, okay? So what might sound really great, a scribe coming up to him and saying, I'm going to follow you. Jesus knows he hasn't considered the cost of following him. He knows what's in his heart. And this is why he responds with telling him, hey, it's not going to be easy. And this is another thing too, to stop and consider when reading this passage, is that, Jesus, he's the Messiah. He's the God-man. He came down to earth as a vulnerable baby. He walked among us as a person. And we also know from back when it tells about the offerings that Mary and Joseph made after Jesus was born, we know that they were poor because they offered the sacrifice that the Old Testament said is the one for people who didn't have a lot of money to offer after having a baby boy. And then here we also know that Jesus, he didn't have it easy. He didn't have it comfortable. he was not a man of wealth. And it's interesting to me because how many times do we hear it preached that if you're doing things right and you're following God, that you're going to be prosperous and you're going to have all these things? And it's like, or we even hear people say things like, if you don't, then you must be doing something wrong. And it's like, well, Jesus didn't do anything wrong. And he was the man of poverty. He didn't have wealth. Why do we think that we should have this life of just all these riches and all these things? I know it sounds good. Prosperity teaching sounds amazing, but it's not reality. It doesn't mean that you won't be blessed. But as we read before, when we were reading in on the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of the blessings that you receive are not monetary. They're a lot better. And it doesn't mean that you might not be blessed with money, but that's not what we should focus on. And if the only reason you're following him is because you think it's going to be easy, he's giving you a heart check right here and saying, hey, it's not going to be easy. There's a cost. And it might not be that you just always have all the things. He's told us that he'll provide for us what we need. We also read that on the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about how he will provide for us. He will take care of us, so we don't have to worry. But we shouldn't think that we're just going to have everything easy because we follow Jesus. That's not biblical. Now, we also see here that he calls himself the Son of Man. So in Hebrew, it's translated son of Adam. Imperial Aramaic, it's son of man. And then the Greek version of it would be like a son of man. So when he's saying he's the Son of Man, it really made some people angry because he's telling them, hey, I'm the God man. So we just talked about the scribe was too hasty in his saying, I will follow you. He hadn't counted the cost and he needed that heart check from Jesus. Okay. Sometimes when you're reading through a passage and you're like, well, why did Jesus say that? Remember, he sees the heart. He knows what's going on inside of them. What might sound like a good thing to say to us, he knows what's going on in their head. He knows what's going on in their heart. And he is going to respond to that, not just the words coming out of their mouth. But we know that the scribe was too hasty. But then there was the disciple who said he wanted to bury his father first. And that also sounds like a good thing, right? Well, it sounds like he's being a respectful son, right? He needs to go bury his father. But again, Jesus knows the heart. And we're going to talk about that also. So I was reading, some people think that the bury the father would be in the context that perhaps his father was sick and he was saying, I need to stay with my father until he dies. Some think that he was already dead. And some say he was just older in age. So the disciple was like, he's probably going to die any day now. He's kind of up there in age, But the main point of it is, like I said, Jesus sees the heart. So he's looking at this disciple and he's saying, I want you to come follow me now. And the disciple is putting it off. He's saying, I need to go bury my father first. Again, that sounds like a good thing. And it might seem heartless for him to say, not to go bury his father. But like we said, Jesus knows what's actually going on with him. He's using it as, I can't right now. What you're asking for me to do, Lord, I know is a good thing, but I have this other good thing over here that I probably need to do first. And Jesus is saying, no, what I ask you to do is the best thing and it's the thing you need to be doing now. This might look like a good thing, but this is what I'm asking you to do. It's kind of like when I ask my daughter to do something around the house and she'll give me a list of all these other things that she did. Well, I did this and I did this, but did you do the thing that I asked you to do? Those are all good things. But did you actually do the one thing that I asked you to do? Well, no, because she was stalling doing all these other things because she didn't want to do the thing I asked her to do. That's what's going on here. It's not that it's bad for him to go bury his dad. It's that God's asked him to do this right now. And he's like, well, I'm going to do this good thing over here first. And God's like, no, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to come follow me. So what can we learn from this in modern day? You've got two different types of people, okay? You've got the person who they see the good things, they see that Jesus can do all these things. They see that maybe there's Christians that they seem to be living a good life. They have money, or they hear prosperity teaching and they think, oh, I'm going to have this good life. And they're like, I'm going to follow you. And God saying, have you actually counted the cost? Do you realize there's a cost to this? Because what happens is, if you are just following because you think you're going to be prosperous and you're going to get all these good things, then when you find out what the cost is, and you find out there are going to be hard times and there are going to be things you have to walk through, those people usually run away because they're like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Jesus is telling us there is a cost, okay? And then there are other people who God's calling them to something right now. He's saying, I want you to do this. And we're like, oh yeah, God, I'm going to do that. That's it. I want to. That's so, like, that's what I want to do. But first, I have this good thing over here and this good thing over here and this good thing over here that I need to do first. And I need to make sure I do these first. And then I'll do your thing. And he's saying, no, that's not what I'm asking of you. I'm asking you to do this right now. Those look like good things. They might be good things, but they're not your good things. They're for somebody else to do. I'm asking you to do what I'm asking you to do. And what I'm asking you to do is the best thing. So you see, how many times do we go off on side quests trying to do all these good things, and they look like good things, they feel like good things, they seem like good things, but they're distracting us from what God is asking us to do. If that's the case, then they're not good things, and we need to leave them be and do what He's asking us to do. So the next portion of this, it says, when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And suddenly a violent storm arose in the sea, and the boat was being covered by waves. But Jesus was sleeping, and the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us. We are going to die. And he said to them, why are you afraid, you men of little faith? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was at once a great and wonderful calm, perfect peacefulness. The men wondered in amazement, saying, what kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? So again, we see all he has to do is speak. He rebukes the elements, the weather, and they stop. And sudden, perfect peace. Now, the first thing you might notice is that Jesus could have prevented the storm altogether. He didn't have to allow the storm to happen because he has authority over even the clouds and the sea and all of it. But he knew that this moment would bring glory to God. It was going to confirm that he was the Messiah, the God-man, that he had the authority even over the winds and the waves. And the disciples were going to learn more from this storm than they would ever learn from a perfectly peaceful sea. Because they're going to learn dependence on him. They're going to learn to trust him. They're going to see what all he can do. Jesus slept, and then the disciples were scared and they cried out to him. How many times in the middle of a storm have we felt like God was asleep? And we cry out in desperation, knowing that he was the only one who could save us. This is a faith builder, and it's a pivotal moment in our lives where we fully learn to rely on him. Him being asleep awakened their prayer life, their faith, their calling out to him. There was a purpose for all of this. How many times have we felt like our prayer life was asleep basically. Like, we were just kind of going about what we do as Christians. And then a storm hits. And what happens? Suddenly, our prayer life comes alive. And we start calling out to God. It's kind of our wake up call. We feel like He's sleeping, and it awakens our prayer life. And we're like, Lord, I need you. I've been in that place before where I felt like I had done everything I could. There was nothing else, and I was at the end of me. And it made me realize that I need Him. I need to depend on Him. It awakened something in me. People sometimes get angry that a storm happens. A storm in life comes upon us. They're like, God could have prevented this. But a better way to look at it is, why is He allowing this storm to happen in my life? What can I learn from it? What is He cultivating in me right now? Because I'll tell you, every storm that I've been through in life, it has been a time of drastic growth in my life too. He's used it to cultivate things in my life that I wouldn't have otherwise. He's used it to build faith in me that I wouldn't have as strong a faith otherwise. In a way, we can sit and we can cry and we can say, Lord, why did you allow this storm to happen? But I've kind of learned over the years to be thankful for the storms, because if we learn to lean on Him through it and go to Him through it, we're going to find that beautiful, perfect peace at the end of it. That sudden, calm, and perfect peace. And that's something else that I'll say too, is that if you just get out on the water and it's perfectly peaceful, you usually don't even notice it. But when you've just been through a storm and then it gets peaceful, you notice it and you appreciate it a lot more. Something else that you'll notice is that Jesus didn't get on to the disciples for waking Him up or for calling out to Him, but He got on to them for their fear. We don't have a reason to be afraid when Jesus is in the boat with us. We might feel like the storm is too much. We might feel like it's out of control. But when He's in the boat with us, we're going to be okay. We just need to call out to Him, and He will answer. Now, going back to that it showed them His glory, a lot of times after a storm passes, you're still going to see, it's still drizzling, or there's an eerie glow in the sky. But it says here that it went to complete, perfect peacefulness. It's a lot like we talked about with Peter's mother-in-law, going straight from fever to straight being able to serve. It showed the miraculous nature of what He did, that it wasn't that it just happened to stop storming when He said that. No, it wasn't your normal storm starting to settle. It was boom, it's peaceful. It was miraculous. So again, it's showing that He is the Messiah. So then we read about Jesus casting out demons. And it says, when He arrived on the other side in the country of the Gardarenes, 2 demon-possessed men came out of the tombs to meet Him. They were so extremely fierce and violent that no one could pass by that way. And they screamed out, "What business do we have in common with each other, Son of God? Have you come to torment us before the appointed time of judgment?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was grazing. The demons began begging Him, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." And He said to them, "Go." So they came out of the men and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and died in the water. The herdsmen ran away and went to the city and reported everything, including what had happened to the men under the power of the demons. And the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And as soon as they saw Him, they begged Him to leave their region. So back then, tombs, they were usually carved out of rocks, so it would be like caves, things like that. These were caves or places where outcasts could take shelter. So people with leprosy, demon possessed, anyone that was banished from the city, they could take shelter in the tombs. You notice that these two men, they were not only a hindrance to themselves, but also to others. Demons are not just happy to ruin the health and life of their host, they also want to hurt those around them. Why do you think that people who are involved in demonic things want to go out of their way to force things upon others as well? The goal of the demonic is to destroy humanity. You'll also notice that Jesus didn't order the demons into the pigs, but he gave them permission to go there. This again shows his authority over Satan and gives us comfort too, because demons can't go where they don't have permission to go. I had a conversation kind of like this with a friend of mine one time because she knew someone who was listening to some teachings. It was some weird stuff, and the person that was listening to these teachings, she was very afraid that these demons were coming at her. And I was like, demons can't go where they don't have permission to go. Jesus has authority over demons. Something else interesting to notice, that swine were also considered unclean under the law. And I read a commentary that said that them going into the swine also was kind of a show of the sacredness of the law, that he allowed them to go into the swine. And this is something else that's interesting about them requesting to go into the swine. This was another means of them harming the people, because if they can't physically harm the men around them any longer, because Jesus said, get out of them, they can still harm people by killing the herd, which is a financial thing for the people of that region. So by doing that, they're destroying something else. Any possession that the devil gets, his goal is to destroy it. So you notice too that the people of the region, they immediately want Jesus to leave. Why do you think that is? Like, they knew these guys were scary. They were full of demons. And then Jesus, he cast the demons out of them. They're normal now. You would think these people would be excited. They would be like, yes, stay with us. But the demons went into their herd of swine, and they lost a herd of swine, which was monetary. They chose swine over Jesus. They chose money over Jesus. They want him to leave because they look at it as not that these two guys are now whole and well. No, they're looking at it as, we just lost money here. How many times do we in modern times choose our swine, our wealth, whatever it may be, over Jesus? And so that is our Matthew chapter 8. I know this one was a little shorter than some of the ones we just did, like the Sermon on the Mount. That takes a little while. So let's go over some of our ahas just real quick. First one is, sin is leprosy of the heart. The law can point out the sin and show us that we're unclean, but only Jesus can make the unclean clean. Only he can reach you in places that no one else would dare. He can touch you and he can make you clean. The second one is, count the cost of serving him. And when he calls you, go. Don't let all the good deeds and the good things that you think you should do get in the way of doing what he asks you to do. Also, he sometimes allows storms to come into our lives to awaken our prayer life and help us lean on him and trust in him more. And then last of all, don't focus on losing swine. Focus on Jesus. So thank you for listening to another episode. As I mentioned earlier, if you enjoy listening to these, make sure to follow or send it to someone that you think it might bless, and give us a rating because that helps reach more people. And I'll see y'all next time.